Okay.
Oh, and we have
All right.
Egon telling us, "Hey, Egon, you are from a broadcasting organization. That is very cool, and you would like to run it at least run an LLM in a private cloud or or on premise." And ways to choose the right LLMs for use cases. Oh, that's very interesting questions. We're going to touch a little bit about that later. First, there's open source models. The biggest, or that I would like to mention at this point in time to you, just to have it in the back of your head, is called Llama from Meta, so from the company that makes Facebook. This completely on premise and usable. The second one is Anthropic's Claude model. This is also interesting for you. And then there is a private version of OpenAI's model that you can access in Microsoft in Azure, in your own Azure tenant. So there's a possibility to get a private model in Azure in your own cloud that is, let's say, isolated from the public OpenAI model. But we will talk about that hopefully later a little bit more in detail. Guido, you want to go ahead?
All right. So yeah, welcome to today's webinar, ChatGPT Beyond the Hype, Embeddings, RAGs, and on-premise large language models for innovators. So my name is Guido Perschet. I'm the head of business development for the Center for Deep Tech Innovation and solution architect for Engine, which is our no-code platform for building enterprise-grade AI applications. And with me is our speaker for today, Marcel Miller, in his position, Director of the Center for Deep Tech Innovation and MD of Engine. So before we hop right into the topic, I'll give you a really short introduction of what the Center for Deep Tech Innovation is, just for you to, well, have an understanding who we are, what we do. So we are kind of a think tank of 7 PhD level experts, along with 10 full stack developers and data scientists that cover a broad range of industry and technology specific knowledge. So our main technologies we focus on, therefore, are blockchain, AI, obvious reasons, climate tech, and IoT. And well, herein we offer different services, which range from classical consulting services to maybe next slide, maybe to giving workshops up to the development and implementation of software. And one of our recent developed softwares is called Engine, which is, as I already mentioned, a no-code platform that allows enterprises to build their own AI applications in the end targeted to their needs and something important in accordance with their compliance requirements. So therefore, we offer several programs, 2 of which I include in this presentation today. The first being the one you see here is the AI Jumpstart program. This is a 8-week program where we provide training in AI and, well, together with you, Soundboard, which processes are useful to be enhanced through AI, and cooperatively develop your first AI application on an engine for these processes. The second program I brought with me is the AI Sparings Partner. So here the focus lies more on the consulting level, which includes, well, providing an understanding of the potential impact AI can have on your business. We scan your processes and see where AI makes sense, where it doesn't make sense, how we can implement it. So going through the whole process on a really detailed way. Basically, being the first step to take when thinking about AI, and then the jumpstart being a little bit of a second step. But like these are 2 of the programs that are possible. So this is just like
Thanks,
our
Guido.
short introduction. So with that being said, I want to give a short overview on your speaker and introduce Marcel, and then symbolically passing the mic over to him.
Thank you very
So
much.
as said, Marcel is the director of the Center for Deep Tech Innovation. He holds a PhD in trust-aware business processes with distributed ledger technologies. Worked already in quite a few big, well, industry companies, to mention some: Siemens, Deutsche Telekom, Innovation Labs, and in academia for TU Berlin, where he did his PhD, Fraunhofer, USA, and the University of Lisbon, Universidad Lisboa. Marcel is an expert in blockchain, AI, and business process management, and his focus basically lies on projects around enterprise-grade AI development and implementation. So I think one of the best speakers you can have for the topics we're covering, and therefore I think I make a good bridge for you, Marcel, to pass over to you and start the presentation.
You're really selling like crazy. It's wonderful. Yeah. Hello, everybody. Also from me, I will be your speaker today. Thank you very much for coming in so high numbers. It's very good. This is going to be hopefully a lot of interaction in this webinar. We have an outline today of first talking a little bit about how we got from ChatGPT to enterprise generative AI, what the challenges of generative AI in enterprise, in big businesses are, and what components usually are there. Then we are talking in this context about specifically about on-premise models, about racks, and about fine-tuning processes and integrations. As said, feel free to, at any point in time, write a question in the chat. I will try my best to keep an eye on my second screen. So if you see me looking to the side, it's not because I'm bored. It's because I'm checking there if there's any questions. Guido will also have an eye on it. And after this webinar, I will also stay here for a bit to answer you some more questions. And even if you have some private questions, there's also an opportunity to go here and do so. This webinar is going to be recorded. Guido, I think you already hit the record button. Yes, I see.
Yes, it's recorded, but only the speaker. So for everybody who wants to speak up and doesn't want to be in the webinar, don't you worry about that.
Good. All right. So you can also go back later, and we are probably also going to send out the slides later that you have something on your hand. So yeah. Let me speak a little bit about how we got here. You remember maybe actually that time last year when I look now out here in Berlin, it snowed yesterday and the day before yesterday. I have some flashbacks to December last year because it was the time when that ChatGPT thing went viral on different types of social media. ChatGPT is a chat interface and more of a fine-tuned model on a large language model called GPT 3.5. Back then, now we have GPT-4 and GPT-4 Turbo, and it was released in 2022. And large language models and transformer models actually have been around for quite some while, but it never got that mainstream attention. And it got the mainstream attention once there was a that simple interface that you could show your colleagues on your phone, on your computer, and do things where you thought, how does that work? Why does that even work? So using an interface that is very easy to use because it's a chat interface and you can literally write there anything you want, and you will get out always something. Never mind how bad your prompt is. There's this whole section of prompt engineering, this whole task of prompt engineering. By the way, we have a page, 2.5-hour webinar on prompt engineering, if that's something for you. But even if you are not an expert, ChatGPT will always give you something back. And that, in combination with the interface, made it so accessible and allowed people really to get a feeling for the potential of this technology of generative AI. It allowed them a little bit to dream, or probably a lot of you, and get ideas on what you can do with these type of applications in your own business, in your company that you work for, in the daily tasks that you have at hand. That being said, there were a lot of impact assessments. Here's, for example, Goldman Sachs from a paper that was published last year. No, it was actually this year in May, where they assessed the impact that different ways of using AI can either replace a certain amount of tasks in your industry. So you see here, for example, office support and legal will have a lot of their processes being replaced with AI, or that are currently being done by manual people. A lot of industries will see that you use AI at least as a complement in your existing processes, That's also where we are in terms of education, but also in terms of computer programming, engineering tasks, sales. And only the let's say the really physical work will be is something where you cannot do generative AI, because generative AI doesn't help you building a skyscraper. If we're not talking about robotics, but that's a different type of AI than maybe in the future. But all physical labor doesn't really have that big of a potential. Doesn't say that there's no potential. We also actually talked to some urban planners lately who used AI to and especially Midjourney to get some inspiration for urban planning and urban development. So this ChatGPT interface that you probably all know and all used at some point in time is not an enterprise-grade system, because it doesn't really address key enterprise challenges that we have. And before I tell you about enterprise AI, I want to reflect on these challenges that are specific for it. First of all, skilling and reproducibility. If you have that vision that our usage of generative AI is that we have all our company, everybody has a ChatGPT account, and all our people are just using ChatGPT at the site, you can never get over a certain problem, and that is reproducibility and skilling. So ChatGPT is easy because never mind what you write in, you get something out. But to get a decent reproducible quality of an output that helps you as much as it can for your current task is not trivial. And that's why prompt engineering is a thing. It's a skill set that you need or will need to have to make high quality prompts and get high quality outputs. But still, if you educate 100 people in your company about how to write good prompts, the results still vary, because everybody writes the prompts a little bit different, they focus a little bit different, they have different tone styles, output and quality, which is usually something that if you are a company that wants to make something reproducible, you want to avoid. So that's a little bit of a challenge in that there. The second is compliance and privacy. So OpenAI is offering ChatGPT on their servers as a SaaS. That's why you don't have to set up any server, anything in your cloud. You just have to put in your credit card or use the free subscription for ChatGPT, and it runs. If you want to use, let's say, personal identifiable information, especially of your customers, or let's say internal information, business secrets, we are, for example, working with a bunch of customers that want to use and generative AI for their internal business intelligence. That's of course something that you are, for good reasons, not allowed to just transfer and hand over to a third-party service. With our servers in OpenAI's case in the United States, where you don't really have control over what is happening. There are right now solutions to that. So there are on-premise models that you can use, like Llama 2 or OpenAI in Azure. So the term on-premise is a little bit, it's a little bit widely spoken in here. Llama 2 is maintained by Meta and is under a free-to-use commercial license. It's not an open source license, but you can use it openly, free of charge for commercial purposes of any size. The difference why it's not completely open source is because Llama or Meta restricts you from using their large language models to build your own to improve other large language models. So it's de facto open source, but there's a slight difference from Llama and to what a very permissive license like the MIT license or Apache 2 would be. There's also in here we have Mistral, for example, in Europe that are buying things, and yeah, stuff like other competitors to OpenAI that make their models open to the public. And there's a bunch of orchestration companies that let you deploy these models quickly, but in generally something like Llama or Falcon you can completely run on your own servers, giving you have the power or in a cloud to do that, because these models are computationally very expensive. OpenAI is offering their GPT-4 model in an Azure tenant. So if you're a Microsoft Azure customer, you can deploy your own isolated version of OpenAI's models inside your Azure tenant and maintain it from there. And if you are already a Microsoft customer, then it's likely that your compliance is okay with you using Microsoft, so that should be a smaller leap. Then the third challenge that we have for enterprise generative AI applications is that these applications that you build, they help you in your business processes, and they're not really silos that stand there in the middle of nothing. So you have data, you have existing systems, you have company knowledge that you probably at some point in time want to use in a large language model. You have your existing infrastructure, you have authentication, authorization, role management, group management, everything that you would consider to be enterprise grade builds the environment where you also have to operate your generative AI system in. So it's not another silo that you're putting there, but it should be integrated to your existing structure. And these are really the challenges that you have in enterprise that you don't have when you are a private consumer using ChatGPT to do something. And we have done a lot of projects on how these things play together in enterprise and business software. And we came up with a model of different components that make a high-level architecture of the ingredients that you have for enterprise generative AI. This part is a little bit more technical, but I'm trying to not get too deep. But in the end, you have always when you are in enterprise AI, you always have these 5 components that you see here. You always have your end application. The end application is in the very top that uses something that a large language model produces at some point in time. That might be a new application, or it might be an already existing application where you want to add some automation with generative AI or some parts of it. And that value creation that you have is being empowered on the very bottom by hardware. Not only for training these models, if you are using a pre-trained model, you mostly don't have to train a model again, or as long as you're not doing any fine-tuning. But still, the evaluation and the execution of the evaluation of these models are computationally very expensive, by several magnitudes more than when you want to just to make a click on a button in a web interface. So there needs to be some hardware that makes that happening. The next layer is the model layer, where you have trained models that answer prompts. And on top of that, there is an orchestration layer that usually connects your applications through to a model to data to be used in your large language model generations that you do. And that data part is really the last part that get into it. We will now look a little bit deeper and make an X-ray on what really the components in there are, so that you have a better understanding of how you can use them and how you can harness them in your own organization. And therefore, we start on the bottom. So large language models need to be trained on data. In the case of OpenAI's models, they have been trained on the data from the internet, from books, from general web crawls, and with billions of tokens, so billions of words as an input to learn the structure of language, the reasoning of language. There's a debate right now how much reasoning these models actually do, or if it's only statistical. A half a year ago, I would have said it's only statistical interference, but right now it's getting a little bit into different spheres, interestingly. Yeah, so what I want you to understand that training these LLMs is expensive. So only the hardware costs for training, I think it was GPT 3.5, was somewhere north of $2.5 million US. We're not talking about the IP, the knowledge, the people, the human capital behind it, only talking about the pure infrastructure cost. Once an LLM is trained, we can use it to generate prompt completions, which is the output of a prompt. You can also call it generations. And to generate these prompt completions, we need to evaluate the model based on some input that we get. And also doing that completion is comparatively pretty expensive compared to non-AI tasks like retrieving a value from a database or doing anything that you would do in a normal web application usually. Then we go one layer higher, and that's the model layer. And right now we have basically three ways on how we can access large language models. One is what I call AI model as a service. The public OpenAI API that OpenAI is offering for application developers, you make there an API call to OpenAI's infrastructure, you get the completion back, but all the execution is being offered as a service on the servers of OpenAI. So that is depending on what your preferences are or what your framework is that you have to work in for compliance, practical or not practical. Especially if you have personally identifiable information, that might be an issue. Yet, what you can do on top of it, you can create a fine-tuned model. We will talk about fine-tuning a little bit later. The second way of how you can interface with a foundational model is that you use an on-premise but pre-trained model, something like Llama, Falcon, that I talked about before. So you basically get the code and the model of these models, so you can access it on your own infrastructure, and you can run it in isolation from other people that would use that model. It works pretty well, but that means also you have to take care of the operation of this model, of maintaining, of getting the infrastructure ready. So it's not as easy as it is or as convenient as it is with a model as a service, but you are trading basically effort and costs for more privacy and more control over what happens with these completions over there. And there is a whole ecosystem of tools for model operations that make operating these models, scaling them, training them, testing them better. There's a whole suite of applications that are doing that. And the last option that you can do, you can of course create an own large language model from scratch. I hardly disincentivize doing that as long as you are not a company on the size of Google. Just because it is a race against time. If you and there's a lot of IP, a lot of knowledge that is in the models of these model providers right now, where you have really a high barrier to get to the quality they have at the moment. Not speaking about the infrastructure costs, but just there. If you are working for an SAP, or if you're working for a Salesforce, probably a different discussion. But if you are a company who doesn't want to focus mainly as they're part of their business in AI, building a model from scratch is mostly not really practical. When you talk about these models, there is a little box here that I want to raise your attention to, is that there's always cost monitoring, because these costs that you have to do for every completion are not negligible. You have to keep an eye on how expensive these things are. You have to optimize your prompts if you want to do it at scale and don't want to just waste money just for the sake of it. Then cost monitoring is really a part that you have to really think about. We have on the next layer, it's the same layer but a little bit higher as a sub layer. We have what I call fine-tuned models, or what the industry calls fine-tuned models. Fine-tuned models use a foundational model and add some secret sauce to it, usually domain-specific expertise. So there was some time in summer where you could see people posting on LinkedIn saying, we launched insert company name GPT. And what most of these people were doing, where they were using some documents from their company and they were doing fine-tuning the model on the data from that company, which works sometimes very well, but also has downsides, because also fine-tuning is costly. And fine-tuning, if you are fine-tuning a model, you have also still the possibility of hallucinations. We talked in our other seminar the other week about hallucinations. So large language models are statistical models. They predict which word, which sentence, which paragraph comes next, depending on your input, depending on your prompt. They're not doing a web search, and they're not fact-checking what they're producing these models. They are making statistical interference based on the data set they have been trained on. And they have been trained usually on the quote-unquote knowledge of the world. So in most cases, it's pretty accurate. But when you ask these models about knowledge they were not trained on, they will just make something up and hallucinate and be confident that this is the answer that it is, which is, especially for enterprises, a huge pain. And the method of fine-tuning is in some cases more error-prone than going for a retrieval augmented generation, which we are going to be talking about later. And then the last subpart of that layer is usually an interface. So an API, queues, function calls, whatever, how you're interfacing from your orchestration layer in your application directly to that layer. It's usually some sort of interface. I recently posted about model executions are becoming a commodity. That might be something that you folks can later read up on, but the quality of most of these models is converging. Right now, in terms of the quality, everybody sees OpenAI as being the gold standard for the quality of these models, but for most use cases, there is a ton of different other models that make also a lot of sense, and where the quality is not that much different. So at some point in time, and we are seeing that right now, large language models and the completions and the access to it have the same characteristics like a commodity market, where you have market dynamics, where you have homogeneity, and especially these large language completions are primary products like oil, which you use to refine and build applications and create value on top of. So they're not standalone things, but they are parts, they are bits and pieces of value creation in your own software, in your own processes. But that maybe here is a side note. When we talk about enterprise data, we talked about, okay, you can do a fine-tuning of the model and just feed tons and tons of Word documents and hope that when you are making a prompt, the statistical interference works out fine. But there is a different way, and that is where you can do that with a lot less hallucinations, especially on your company data, and that is with retrieval augmented generation of RAGs, and where you have specific predefined data sets that you would like to use. We always distinguish between case-specific input data and case-independent data. Case-independent data would be the knowledge of that you have static in your company. How much revenue did we make last year, in which areas, on which products. It is usually case-independent data. And then you have case-specific input data, so case-specific context data that tells you what in your specific case you want. For example, let's take that. I want to have an AI that can create, that can tell me my finance department how much revenue we made in a certain locality, in a certain range of products. When I say, hey, give me our aggregated revenue in Q4 of 2022 in Western Europe in our cloud products, then cloud products, Western Europe, and revenue in Q4 is case-specific input data. Your reports, your quarterly earnings reports, all of these statistics, this is case-independent data that you have stored somewhere in a database and that needs to cleverly be retrieved when it comes to that. And when I say retrieved, I'm speaking mostly about what you call these days retrieval augmented generation. And that is used to enhance the contextual understanding of a large language model to minimize hallucination. So it's basically, you can think of it of smartly pre-selecting input data for your large language models. And you can use that to fill, of course, gaps that a large language model has. So a large language model usually doesn't know your company internal information. And it can handle situations where you have large amounts of data that you need to process in your prompt. So a prompt has usually a limit on how long it can be, and if you need something larger, you need to store and retrieve that. And therefore, we have retrieval augmented generation, or RAGs. I'm not going to talk too much about the maths, but generally, what our RAG is doing, we have to create what we call embeddings from text. And embeddings are very high level numerical representation of the words and the meaning of these words in a specific context in data that you have. We can dive there much deeper, but that might not be probably not be the best thing to do at 4:30 in the afternoon here in Germany. But what I want you to understand that embeddings are numerical condensed representation that take off less space and where you can do computations on that encodes the semantics of your text. When I say what you can do computations on, means you can do stuff like similarity search. So if you have an embedding that is a book about quantum computing, and you are writing a prompt that says, explain to me what a qubit is, you can get through chunks of these books and compare this sentence, what is a qubit, to the text of this book and find exactly the section where a qubit is explained. And that is basically done by similarity search of these vectors in which an embedding is stored, and some mathematical computation. So the translations from words to numbers in a way that you can actually do these things is pretty awesome, but nothing that we will dive too deep in today. Just that you have it in your mind. And what happens when you do some retrieval augmented generation, some RAGs, you have a preparation phase in which you take large amounts of data, and that doesn't have a theoretic limit, just limited by your storage. But just think of it, you can put as many data as you want. You think of it, all your Word documents, all your company databases, all that information that is over the last 10, 15, 20 years occurred in your company. You can create embeddings of all of them and store them in a vector database and make them searchable. And every time we are making a retrieval or we are making a prompt, we will, before we send anything to a large language model, we will do a similarity search in this vector database. And we will just identify the relevant vectors that are relevant to your text. So if you say, if you write what is a qubit in your vector database has some information about quantum computing, it will identify the text chunks that will be translated to clear text again where these things are being explained. And these text chunks can be fed into a large language model that executes then your prompt. So you guide the large language model and tell them, hey, I want an answer to a question, and here is a piece of text where you can probably find it. That's how retrieval augmented generation is, and that's also the reason why hallucinations are so small when you do that in the correct way. And that's why I always recommend retrieval augmented generation in here, even before you think about fine tuning or anything else. Then the next part in our components is the orchestration. So you need to connect your application logic to racks to your models, and that's usually done with an orchestration layer. You could also do that in the application layer, but it makes it very, very tedious and very much work, because it's always the same. You connect stuff from A to B and create some prompts that you orchestrate and give the answer back to an application and to the end user. Guido said initially, we at the Center for Deep Tech Innovation, we not only do these type of courses and webinars that we have right now, but we also build applications together with customers. And we have, and we're specifically from a spin-off of the Center for Deep Tech Innovation, we are working with a platform that is called Engine, that is basically an orchestration engine of these different of prompts that is connected through models and to data. So basically, when you go on that thing, an engine that connects these top parts here together. And Engine has a no-code interface. You can build and try out some processes with generative AI in there on enterprise level, and it has some integration to enterprise connectors. And everything that you have in Engine can be executed and on-premise, executed and deployed on-premise. I'm just saying that here at this point, just to give you examples that yes, there's tooling for all of these bits and pieces along the way. You could either try to stitch these pieces and build your own architecture that looks a little bit like that together, or you can use pretty existing components that an Engine has, or other companies have parts of these similarly as well, so that you just have a bit of an understanding of the ecosystem that you might want to venture in. So in summary, we have these layers: hardware for training and execution of the models. Models are trained to answer prompts. You have either a model as a service, you deploy on-premise pre-trained models, or you build your own model from scratch, which I don't recommend. You always have to keep the tabs on costs, because these things can get very expensive, and especially if you do not prompt in the most efficient way, you will have a huge bill in the end. You can do fine-tuning. I mostly advise against it in most of the cases. Just in some cases, it really makes sense. There's interfaces of these models that you use to integrate into your applications. The orchestration layer basically combines the data for retrieval augmented generation and a prompt and your context-specific input data, and your application layer. This is where all your other enterprise systems, all your other company systems are sitting and building something. And yeah, with that, we are through let's say the presentation part. Now we're getting into questions that you won't have. But if some of you guys are leaving already, please let me give you some input here first. We are at the Center for Deep Tech Innovation, of course, we do these courses, but we have also other things that we offer. If you need more guidance and support on your enterprise AI journey, write us an email, talk to us. We are more than happy to help. If you want to have implementation projects, we have implementation teams where you can build proof of concepts, try out, but also roll out things. And if you need more training, we offer other courses and certificates. And I think next week, Wednesday, we have a prompt engineering seminar for 2.5 hours that is in depth, and we can probably send you the link to that later in the chat. Feel free to add me on LinkedIn or write me a message if you via email if you have something that you don't want to discuss here in public. And apart from that, I will just open up now the floor for questions that you have right now, and yeah, just hit me. Guido, I see a lot of people asking for recordings.
Yes,
I can't hear you, Guido.
already.
Yeah.
Yes, already on the answer question. So yes, there will be a recording. We will send it out once we've uploaded everything. The next link is the overview on the next events we will have. 3 workshops in total, 2 free ones, 1 paid one. The paid one's the one on prompt engineering. Yeah, so I hope that all questions are therefore answered so far. But yeah.
Do we have any more content related questions? Egon, you were asking in the beginning. I hope I could help you at least a little bit high level and answer at least your questions. So yeah, don't worry. Llama is pretty powerful, and you can have it completely on premise together with other things. What model is really best for your specific use case? I don't know your use case, but some perform better in different scenarios. I'm more than happy to help and assess that on that level. Great. We have more questions. Kent has a question, right?
Yeah.
I'd be curious to ask you about how this has promise as a tool in a new product development. Kent, can you give me a little bit of context? Feel free to unmute yourself and tell me a little bit more about what you mean by in product development as a tool. Great.
Hello, this is Kent. Can you hear me?
Yes, Kent.
Perfectly.
Great. Yeah, I'm an industrial designer and I develop new products, and we've used Midjourney a little bit, and it's been interesting, as you would imagine. Your first experience isn't necessarily positive, but it's very interesting. Curious if you work with folks in product development and what your experience has been there.
We have here a company that are industrial engineers too, that do mostly product design for automotive and innovations in automotive. So they build concepts for little, I would call it they have one product. It's a car with 4 wheels, but like a bicycle car. How they use it right now is they use it for ideation, and I'm working with them on ideation processes. And what we are doing there is, you usually have as a designer, you usually have a goal statement what you have to design. Let's say a chair with 6 legs that helps you to sit more upright, right? What we use or what we do with them is we use this description of the product. And we are not feeding it to Midjourney, but we are feeding it to ChatGPT to say, hey, generate me variants of that product on how it could be. Yeah, it could be a chair with it could be a chair with 6 legs. It could be a seat with 6 legs. It could be an armchair with 6 legs, right? This is all something that a generative text application can do very well. And then We had we are iterating also not using Midjourney first, but we are using also ChatGPT to iterate over styles. For example, I would like to have an eclectic chair that has certain features. Give me a list of features and combine these features so that this chair has it. So we use there in product development, we use first a generative text tool that generates you many different prompts, very creative, that you put then into Midjourney, where you kind of say, okay, what are the variables that you want to iterate on and where you want to have different inputs and different feelings. And then, of course, then there's Midjourney, and Midjourney, you have, what I advocate is mostly that you try to keep your Midjourney prompt in as stable as it can. And you say, of course, you always want to have it drawn in a style. You always want to have maybe a blueprint style or a technical drawing of your design. You always want to have it from a certain perspective. So that's what we have been experiencing in product development a lot, is these two things: using a generative text tool to iterate and to build stuff, and then feeding it in the second part to Midjourney. And yeah, we build automations like that
Cool.
in our tool.